almost said what you need. And I want to talk a little bit about Zack Snyder's movies. I want to talk a little bit about that because um, I think people get the wrong idea about where Zack Snyder comes from with his movies. Uh, Reels in Motion, I think it is their stream, their YouTube. They put out a questionnaire. You guys could check it out, and it talks about. It asks the question, you know, what is? Are you still interested in DCU movies? And what are you watching now? So a lot of people, for some reason, think of Zack Snyder as an action director. A lot of people think of Zack Snyder as someone who's a nihilist, meaning that right and wrong is not important in the story. It's more about what's appropriate for the situation. Um, some people think that, he's influenced by Aaron Rand, etc. And I see people get inspiration, for example, from Zack Snyder's movies. I'm I could tell you right now, Invincible, which is a Amazon Prime uh, animated superhero film with basically parallel characters to DC characters, Superman, etc. Um, you can see it draws inspiration from stuff that Zack Snyder has done, how the shots are made, and sort of a certain degree of, how should I put it, um, edginess to it, right? However, that is a total misunderstanding of what Zack Snyder is. And a lot of the tropes and ideas of what Zack Snyder does is not in any way, um, you know, Invincible's action is interesting. The action in the movie, because for a cartoon or animated feature, it's pretty hardcore. I've seen worse, but it's pretty hardcore. Um, and for superhero uh, animated feature, it's pretty hardcore. However, as to the content of it and the subject matter, it's basic. It's very basic. And while you can say that it's a lot more complex than some other animated uh, superhero features we've seen, I just want to say this is not like, okay. So there are certain action sequences and certain clashes which are interesting, and we have some, how should we say, we have some developmental things happening in the movie which make it interesting. However, to say that the movie is not just a rehash of Man of Steel and BVS, and even to some degree, a little bit, um, Zack Snyder's Justice League, is to really understate it. But what I try to explain to people with storytelling is there must be substance to it. Like right now, the superhero genre does not appeal to me in any way, shape, or form. Um, you know, doesn't. There's nothing there for me. as a person. Uh, I think the closest thing to something that might amuse me and might actually get me involved in it would be a Shazam movie. Not Shazam, um, Black Adam. Um, but everything else is probably not interesting at all. Not one thing. What makes Zack Snyder's movies interesting is, to me, the qualities that make us what we are, human. It's the humanism in the movies that makes the movies interesting to me. And so, what is lacking in a lot of these other movies that I see, because they really they think this is what Zack Snyder's about. He's not about that. From day one, Zack Snyder's never been about that. I try to explain to people, Zack Snyder's not really about violence. I know people think it's about violence. He's not glorifying violence. He's using the violence as a means to an end, but really he's interested in the individuals. As I said before, Zack Snyder was never about gods. People are like, oh, yes, there's gods, it's about the gods. No, he will describe and be quite descriptive about the gods, the godlike powers individuals may have, but he's always focused on the individuals themselves. And he's not just interested in the individuals as characters interesting and amusing. He's interested in the values these characters have. And the deconstructive aspect of it is in stretching these individuals who have a value system, stretching them to their ultimate limit and testing their value systems. Right? That's what makes his movies substantive. That's what makes his movies have a really great quality to them. It's not just episodic for episodic sake. It's not just dramatic for dramatic sake. With almost all the other superhero movies I've seen, whether you take them seriously or not, when you look at horrific superhero films like Brightburn, or the supposedly revolutionary Invincible, which is pretty gory and takes things to another extent. Superheroes fight, gods clash. They're more focused on that kind of aspect of it. The gods clash, gods get injured, people need to be repaired, etc. So there's a much more realistic take on an animated feature. Yes, sure, but that's superficial in the sense that you're describing events for me. You're walking me through this teenager's life and his development. That's all well and good. You got plot twists at the end. But what essentially have you told me about myself? And that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand about Zack. Zack's films are director driven, but it's also opinionated, and it's his way of speaking about and viewing the world. So Cyborg is not saying F the world for no reason. You get why he's saying that. And you could identify with it as a person yourself, where sometimes you want to say F the world because things have been so heavy and burdensome to you. My point being, it's the relatability of the people in the movie, whether they be human or not, that makes his movies have an impact. And also, this movement came off of those movies. This movement embraced those values that the movie had, and that's why we're seeing real live sort of heroic acts and also determination, persistence by people who are considered all kinds of negative things about them. I want to show one more thing. I want to speak about Zack Snyder and his DCU movies because I want to speak about this other aspect to it that I think is worth being verbalized. So another thing that makes Zack Snyder's movies, people say stand the test of time, whatever, is the fact that all these other movies are focused on awing you on what these heroes can do, how powerful and how strong they are. They may even come from aspects of, their angles of existence and they're explaining why their angles of existence are good. Basically, Omni Man is General Zod, right? Um, so the twist is that General Zod cannot be beaten, right? So I'm just trying to get you guys to understand the inspiration that these guys come with the thing. Let's say that Invincible doesn't have a comic strip and all of that, but I'm just saying. My point is that it's not only about the translation of a movement, but empowerment of people. After you come out of a movie, sometimes you are discussing the characters of the movie and you're involved in the movie, but is the movie instructive to you as to how you should conduct yourself? Is there something you could take away? When I listen to, for instance, Brent Culp or some other channel, which is sort of speaking about certain aspects that make movies instructive, how you could be a hero in your community and blah, 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 blah. I think the take homes from these movies, I believe, is there. And say what you may about Zack Snyder, and people have been very critical of him, but yet you hear people praising up these movies that come after him, like Invincible or Civil War, which to me is a flimsy movie that has absolutely nothing in it, or like heaping praise on other movies that actually drew tremendous inspiration from BVS. And I just think that whether it's Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, or whether it's Man of Steel, or Wonder Woman, or um, Zack Snyder's Justice League, I just think that these movies have substantive value in them. That the story that's being written and the story that is portrayed to us translates into value. And that's the strength of the story, in my opinion, of Zack Snyder's stuff. Man of Steel, it wasn't the action, it wasn't the fighting. In fact, the majority of Man of Steel was not about combat or fighting. It came down to battles, and there were some really tremendous battles in Man of Steel, but that wasn't the power, that wasn't the strength of Man of Steel. Man of Steel was about the nonviolence. It was about the values that Superman had. It was about his ability to, in his search to find himself, in his inherent Smallville raising values. It was that made that story so beautiful. The fact that Superman is thinking of preserving life. The fact that Superman, even before he's Superman, right? Even before he's anything, he's trying to save the oil workers. He's saving the children on the bus. And he doesn't even have to use his physical strength to save people. You see him looking out for the bartender lady, but he's not imposing his physical strength. He has a lot of physical strength, but we see him impose his mental strength, where he's not looking to strike the guy down, where he's not looking to dominate the guy. Even though the guy is trying to do him harm, he's just standing up for the lady like a gentleman. We see him again in a nonviolent sort of way, saving Lois Lane. He uses his abilities in that case. because Superman is more than just his abilities and his capabilities and what he could do, right? What makes Superman important is inspiring us and giving us hope so that we can continue onwards, right? That's the whole idea behind the Superman. And so we see Superman in Jonathan Kent, where he's trying to make sure everybody gets to safety, that they're okay. It's not his capabilities that make him super. It's the fact that his heart is in it to try to help other people, assist other people, and make sure everyone's okay, right? So the idea behind Superman is really cultivated by, as we see in the story, more so the selflessness and the ability, the desire to help other people. And that throughout, that's the driving force why he even goes up against General Zod, why he comes out of obscurity, why he's even testing his abilities and strengths when his father sort of lets him know what the House of L is about. Overarching all of that was really the cultivation from those small town, small country values, earnest, simple values. And that's the overarching theme of Man of Steel. And it goes into BVS, where life is much more complex. And even though somebody may be sincere and earnest in their desire to share these, small town values with the world very earnestly and sincerely, that it can be interpreted several different ways. And that's what makes life kind of complex. And even with, Clark's desire to keep his ears close to the ground and be reporting on stuff, in spite of all of that, you see the development of complexities because life is complex. And the complexities, or sort of, the sort of, you know, additional difficulties that come along with being someone who's the world's policeman, with being someone who's trying to inspire other people, is that you sort of see you don't want to have totalitarianism because that can happen very easily. And that's the difference. You see, because all of us were not born into a system. Well, not all of us. Actually, you have different systems of governance in different countries. But for those of us who have been born into countries where you have freedom to choose whatever direction you want to go in your life, whether you're predisposed to certain things or not, for those of us who have that freedom to choose, which is a beautiful thing, that is what this story is about. So Superman has the freedom to choose. He wants everybody on his planet to be free to choose whatever they want to do as well. And that form of governance versus a sort of mono, sort of almost authoritarianism is what BVS was all about. It was about this balance of a multi consulting sort of way versus a unilateral sort of way of conducting oneself. Because, once again, the dilemma wasn't in fighting. Zack did not highlight the fighting aspects of the movie. They come to blows, yes, fine. But in a society or a world like ours, combat and physical force is not it's not something that necessarily is relevant. How many of us come to blows and punch each other? No. So whereas Avengers was going into these clashes and physical wars and battles between Avengers and stuff, that's stupidness. You need to have a good case and a good point for why two of these great, heroes would go up against one another, right? Furthermore, what Zack did was he also showed the reason why, yes, they need to use their strengths and abilities now because you're dealing with a really serious threat. So Doomsday was like that threat that sort of said, okay, yeah, it's really important that they fight. But to say superheroes need to fight each other, it's stupid, or fight anything. And so I think that's where that grounded aspect and the fact that Zack is pushing questions and situations that promote not just humanism but also promotes the ability to choose. Again, again, this is very important because this is basically what the movement's fueling itself on or moving on. We don't know what the future brings. Right? Zach saying we don't have all the answers. But what we seek to do is multilaterally, as well as in individual ways, make decisions and choices which we hope will be for the betterment of everyone. And that's the whole point behind his superhero genre, superhero movies. It's translatable. It's something people can identify with and they can embrace some of these values and use. And I think every now and then you guys need to step away from, say, for instance, social media, the internet, whatever, and interface with people. Coming out the shadows means interfacing with people and dealing with real life issues. And, you know, effecting change is beautiful. And that's the thing I'm trying to get to other people. I know it's a lot of us talk about movies and movies and movies. Hey, excuse me about yawning because I'm sleepy. But this is the sort of stuff that I really really look forward to, and I don't see that really in the upcoming movies that we have. I see a lot of intrigue, I see interest and stuff, but I'm like, what's the takeaway? What's the takeaway? And that's the thing that I think for me, you know, I look for the takeaway, something I could take away with me, and so I'm going to be checking out Army of the Dead. Of course, I think there are going to be Easter eggs concerning, the Snyderverse and what's upcoming with the Snyderverse. And I've been kind of keeping my ears to the ground, listening to the interviews that they're interviewing Zack concerning Army of the Dead. And but my thing is that I think that's the thing about Zack that I like about his movies. It's not so much the violence in them. He's very impressive with how he choreographs action in his movies. I think that's something we all know. But it's not about how gory or violent he gets. And I think that take home is what I think falls on deaf ears. People don't realize he's a really excellent storyteller, and not just excellent storyteller, but he's actually putting virtue or value. He's breaking down. So, okay, this is why he's not a nihilist, clearly. Zack is not just deconstructing characters to say he's deconstructing them. Zack tried to explain to people. He'll do a construction, then he'll do a deconstruction. For example, with Superman, we start off with the construction of Superman, right? And Man of Steel is that. Then we deconstruct him. When we say we deconstruct him, it's not that Superman in and of himself is not himself, like he's turned evil or something. It's not that. It's that we're challenging him and we're challenging all his value systems, right? So we deconstruct it. And then we bring him back and we construct him again in Justice League. All right, part 1. And then we're going to deconstruct him again in Justice League part 2. And then we're going to construct him again in Justice League part 3. This is the idea behind it. And why people love Zack Snyder's movies, why does Zack Snyder's movie stand the test of time, is because regardless of what the media tried to say, or what is tried to be circulated in the trades, the truth be told, these movies have a lot of rewatchability and durability because of the value systems in them. I think that's why I love these movies so much. You can milk value systems out of a movie, obviously, but with Zack, that's his intention. And you can just look at how he lives his life, how he treats people, and you get the idea that these are the values that he actually grew up on, and he's sort of showing why he loves these heroes in an earnest, pure way. I think that's what made Wonder Woman movie that Patty Jenkins directed so beautiful. It was a beautiful movie because, again, it was coming from a place of purity to some degree in terms of what we as human beings would desire for ourselves. I think that's what makes superhero movies, in my opinion, superhero movies. And I think that's why Superman is so relatable to so many different people now. Henry Cavill's Superman. Um, so when we talk about Zack Snyder's DCEU movies, I think this is what I think separates them from all the other junk that I see out there. A lot of the stuff that I see out there is is drama. It's very dramatic, but there's no reverberation after it. It's like you watch a set of stuff and it's like, okay, yeah, it was great entertainment, and that's it. You don't walk away. You may even walk away thinking to yourself, wow, man, that was just wow. Or maybe you see the perspective, maybe you don't, of the supposed villain. Or maybe you look at it and say, well, maybe that guy's not a villain, maybe he is. Regardless, the thing about it is you walk away more intrigued than you walk away with something. And I just think Zack makes you walk away with something versus just being intrigued. Because most of his movies are based on our humanity. So that's how I look at it. I'll give you guys some updates on. So what am I watching right now? What am I watching right now? So I wanted to see Tenant. So I think I'm going to look forward to seeing that. Ironically, I'm watching Dry Bar Comedy on Facebook a lot. Listening to comedians give some really unique takes on things, on a world and even relationships and so on. And then I'm also interested in any other upcoming movies. Nothing really interesting. I looked at the Venom trailer and was not impressed. People like Carnage, Venom, and I'm like, yeah, that stuff doesn't intrigue me. Like I said before, there are very few movies out there. I remember I wasn't really a big moviegoer. I was a big moviegoer once upon a time, and then I went away, studied, and when I came back, I wasn't really into movies. And you know, I'm still not really into the movie thing, really, to be honest with you. Because to me, like I said before, a movie needs to have some sort of intrinsic value for me. I don't just arbitrarily like watching movies to say, oh, and don't get me wrong, Zack Snyder really is great at, giving you all that comic book stuff and also just great action scenes and all of that. But I think the strength of Zack Snyder, especially with the Man of Steel, how he started off the DCEU, didn't come from his action scenes. Don't get me wrong, his action scenes are lit, but that wasn't the thing really that I think made me care. It was the development of the characters and the humanity, things that I personally, as myself, as I moved through life, related to and drew from those movies. So I think that's what makes, to me, these movies much more rewatchable. So, like for example, when I think of the Flash scene where he saves, everyone, and he charges up Cyborg. Those scenes are not, that whole entire scene with the Flash. It was an action scene, but it wasn't about violence. It wasn't about killing anyone. And it's the most inspirational scene of all the scenes. What makes Superman so great is not when Superman's punching out somebody. It's when Superman's inspiring people. That's when he's at his best. And to me, his inspiration to inspire the Flash to be what he was inspirational in and of itself. Same thing with Batman. How Batman got inspired by Superman's death, I thought was really telling. Because again, Zack Snyder's storytelling is not so much about gore and guts and violence like people misunderstand him to be, because they saw Watchmen and the way our Watchmen ended. This is where they get this nihilistic nonsense from. Because if you go and watch Owls of Ga'Hoole, for example, it's not nihilistic in any way, shape, or form. There's literally a moral to the story. There's literally a hero's journey, right? If you look at Dawn of the Dead, it's not nihilistic. You look at 300, not nihilistic. So for people to say, just based on Watchmen, which they thought was Zack's greatest movie, that he's nihilistic, to me is just retarded. Zack was giving you a take on Watchmen, trying to stay true to the comic to some degree. And his take on Watchmen was a commentary again on the hypocrisy of our world, the hypocrisy of human beings. And again, Watchmen, the comic, sort of covers that sort of stuff. And ultimately, in the end, though ultimately in the end, Ozymandias sort of manipulates the situation to get world peace, in his take at least, it must be understood that while it was expedient what happened, that the hypocrisy of the situation is still there, where other people behold the hypocrisy of it. And Rorschach, he is not willing to compromise the secrecy of the situation. He sees it as something where he should speak out about it. Now, even though he's annihilated for that, that is still something in which it should be valued, because inherently, even though he is annihilated for it, and he himself is an extremist in how he sees things, it must be understood that it's not about the secrecy of something that's important, but do you get the inherent value in what is being said in the story? Right? I have not looked at the extended cut and the direct cuts of Watchmen, so I should really look at those. But my point being that for somebody to say that it's nihilistic because of the end of Watchmen and how Watchmen ended and concluded is to be somewhat naive, I think. Because I truly believe that why can't the story end like that? You're telling a story and you're saying what's most expedient is the important thing. And that sometimes, in some situations, sometimes you have to say, with this situation, this is what is expedient. All right? And that's life. People do it all the time. Sometimes people say, let's not visit. I know all of this happened, but we can't really visit that right now. Right now, it's about expediency. Not necessarily do I always agree with those kinds of opinions, but I've been in situations where, like, you can't revisit certain things because the consequences of those things would be worse than if you were to try to address those things. It's kind of like you have to look at what's priority sometimes, right? And that is how people like Donald Trump, for example, he's describing a situation. That's how Donald Trump gets off the hook for doing, for waging a coup. He straight up waged a coup, but he's off the hook for that. Because expediency says we can't dwell on this. And while we're addressing this issue, we can't dwell on this. We try to prosecute him, didn't get through, and we move forward. Okay? And The point behind it is that when we know these things, when we understand how sometimes corporate structure may work, or how a hierarchy may work, it informs us so that we can move in a better way. And the fact that actually Hollywood took issue with Watchmen and how Watchmen ended, to me, is a good thing, because it shows people don't feel comfortable with solutions like that, even though Hollywood acts very much like that many a time, very nihilistic. They they espouse certain value systems, and then they act contrary to that, right? They just act in their own self-interest, and the hypocrisy of that is what Zack Snyder exposed. And I find that a lot of Zack Snyder's movies really exposes people, and I think people feel uncomfortable about it. BVS is a perfect example of that. Um, and I think that's what um, certain members in Hollywood really wanted this guy. Like, this dude needs to get, because he was like the new guy on the block. You know what I mean? Even though he's been around since the '80s, he was like the new guy on the block, and with that big platform, it's a funny thing, and I've seen them troll Zach like that. Marvel would come, we would talk about, I remember back in 2016 talking about how Zach was like this independent director, and it's like a big indie film. It's like a film noir, Batman v Superman. And I remember right after that, Marvel comes out with a film. I think it was the Russo brothers, and they were like, "This is like a huge indie film," and I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Because I remember talking about BVS, and then after we debated and argued these things online like forever, and I remember these people coming out and saying these things, and I was like, "Wow, like really, like really," because it was like you could tell they were trolling. You talk about the Russo Brothers with Civil War was an indie film. That's not a fucking indie film. Come on, man. That's Hollywood. I don't know any. I'll be honest with you. I don't know any Marvel film that wasn't done by committee and not Hollywood all over it. You could see it. You could feel it. Not one of their films. Even Ryan Coogler's um, Black Panther. You could feel the Hollywood in it, and you just have to ignore the Hollywood and just watch to see how the story would go. And I think they did some unique things in that movie, but still, you felt the marvel and the jokes and the, oh my god. So, um, the point being that I really appreciate Zack Snyder's take on things, though people have never really quite. I remember, hearing people say, Zack, he's more of a right wing guy, and talk about nihilism, everything that's negative they spoke about. But I didn't understand that at the time. It was like this campaign against the guy, like it was just attacking the guy relentlessly, you know, and it was from coming from in house. It wasn't Marvel, even though he had Marvel people and lots of people in Hollywood who were pro Marvel. It was really attacked from inside his own camp in DC, not DC, sorry, in Warner Brothers Studios, who were sabotaging. And I never knew this until now. It's really blatantly coming out now, and you see the media and people, and even Zach's kind of speaking a little bit about it. And it's sad because ultimately, in the end, I think there are a lot more fans of Zack Snyder, obviously, because you see directors taking all kinds of inspiration from his stuff. And also, you see a lot of people inside of Warner Media and inside of Warner Brothers and HBO Max and AT&T Sports Zach, you know, because his movies are inherently a lot of value in his movies, man. Are you kidding me? He gives you all of that great excitement, explosiveness, but he's really trying to tell you a much simpler story, a much more intimate story, a much more, to me, beautiful story. So I just wanted to talk about that because I'm not really interested in comic book movies like that. Even though I must say I like comic books, I like the social commentary that comes out in comic books. I really enjoy graphic novels and stuff when I do pick up one and read it. And I may still go into some comics, just delve into some comics just to see what's up. Some people are more versed in comics than I am, but I'm an old guy anyway, old has been. But I just really enjoy uh, the perspective of some of these stories, and I'm very glad to have been a part of an era where I could actually talk about this stuff and to see the reality of it. It wasn't just about, see, for some people it's about, oh yeah, well, we got to see the Justice League on the screen. No, that's a cop out. It's how these characters are portrayed on the screen that I liked, I enjoyed, and I was glad I was a part of. Um, so it is, to me, it's a very beautiful thing that we got to see up to the Snyder Cut, and I do truly believe we will continue onwards to see the other two movies. And what I would tell you guys is think of it as a opportunity of a lifetime to see this build up to Justice League Part Two. I think of this as a big hype train towards Justice League Part Two, and I can't wait for that. You know, because to me that's the biggest thing out there still, and I couldn't care less what's what's going on other channels and other things because I know when Zack tells a story, he's looking to detail aspects of us. It's not just a story that it's not just a story that's about um, some characters and what they can do and their powers and how they fight with one another and how the story. No, it's always something about us. That's what I like about it, and that's where my take homes are with these movies. So that's basically, I think, what makes these movies so attractive. I'll give you guys some stats on, and of course, he didn't do a lot of DCU movies. He's done what, four, four DCU movies. He's directed three, and he's wrote the story for one, or at least credited with the story for one. And it's not really his story because it's really another guy who wrote. Zack had a different different take somewhat, but he got credit for the story. But you know, all four stories, and I include Wonder Woman in there. David Ayer's Suicide Squad, while it's part of the Snyderverse, that was David Ayer. And from what guys been telling me, Prime and they've been telling me about that movie. Oh my goodness, I definitely want to see it. So release the air cut. Um, with respect to upcoming DC properties, what would I like to see? So, like I said before, I'm not against the Hamadaverse. Not against it. If there's one thing I would say is, may we have more verses. May we have more universes. So we have the CW. That's great. We have the Hamadaverse. That's great. We have the Snyderverse. That's great. We have the, I guess, DC Online, which is now moving across to HBO Max. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. The more the merrier. More takes, more versions. Some people will like some people won't like some. There's nothing wrong with that. And I try to just explain to people that, you know, variety is the spice of life. And even if you, the particular version of that reality is not your thing, well, you can move around in the buffet until you find something that is your thing. And we need to have entertainment that everyone can enjoy. Somewhere they can find their stuff that's entertaining to them. So I don't really have a problem with the Modiverse. My thing is, like I said before, Snyderverse. Let it exist. Let it be. You could have the Hamadaverse and the Snyderverse existing together. and there will be people who will go and see the Hamadaverse and enjoy it. Walter Hamada should hopefully have a home run with the Suicide Squad. And people are like, "Well, Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead is kind of going to subvert the Suicide Squad." No, it's not going to. Army of the Dead is. I'm interested in seeing what kind of story Army of the Dead has, but it's not going to subvert Suicide Squad, not at all. If anything, it might whet people's appetite for it, because once again, what people don't realize is Zack Snyder's a hype man. He hypes up the movies that you're going to bring, and the only thing you have to do is present a movie that's decent. Aquaman was hyped by Justice League 2017, right? But more so, it was supported by Snyder Cut fans. If the Snyder fandom did not support Aquaman, it definitely wouldn't have made $1 billion. I constantly say this over and over. I repeat it. Now, I didn't support Aquaman, to be honest with you. I just didn't go see it. I still haven't watched the movie in its entirety. Um, but I would say to you guys that, you know, it's Snyder Cut fans that supported Aquaman. Snyder Cut fans are going to support Suicide Squad. No doubt about it. And if it's a good movie, they'll keep on supporting it. And the point behind it is not that it's about making these movies fail. Why would I want to see a movie fail? I don't want to see a movie fail. No movie. Right? It's a creation. Somebody took time to create it, whether it was committee got involved or not. Somebody took time to create these movies. It's about entertainment. And if you're not entertained by them, then you're not. It's okay. But ultimately, in the end, what I'm saying is that there's room for everybody. There's room for the Snyderverse. There's room for the Hamadaverse. There's room for every single kind of verse you could say. And mainly because HBO Max needs content. New, fresh content all the time. So, I mean, the only thing that's keeping it back from happening, the Snyderverse, are people who are determined for it not to happen for very petty personal reasons. And those people, once they get out the way, we're going to have the Snyderverse. We're going to have it. Because thankfully, Zack Snyder's Justice League performed on a level that there's no controversy about this. It's unanimously agreed that he did an excellent Justice League movie. It's unanimously agreed across the board. People say, well, it's a tad bit long. Their criticism is mostly with length and the fact that, he, it seemed like it was ending like Lord of the Rings. The comparisons between it and Lord of the Rings are pretty interesting. It was finishing multiple times over and over, right? But by and large, most people love it. Most people enjoy it. It's a good run for them. And I'm happy about that. Because what that says to us is there's room for more. Isn't that what the movie said? There's room for more. So, I mean, let's get it, man. Let's get it. Jim Lee, he celebrates DC all the time. I love Jim Lee's attitude to how these things are. I wish, to be honest with you, if there's one person I wish was the head of DC Films, I know he's not really a filmmaker, he's more of a comic book writer, but I just feel his spirit would be one in which we really enjoy Jim Lee. Jim Lee he would be the guy I wish would have DC Films. That's my guy right there. Because his spirit is just such a fantastic spirit. Like he celebrates DC, and you can see he really is like he has this deep love for DC and all the different versions that come out with DC. You can see Jim Lee's that kind of guy, and I just wish he would be the head of DC Films. It doesn't need to be Zack. It doesn't need to be Deborah. That would be awesome. It doesn't even need to be um, um, anybody else. I think DC Films would do very well under Jim Lee. Walter Hamada, I mean, he's got his own thing he's trying to do, right? And he was brought in for a particular reason. But with a guy like Jim Lee, I really think that would benefit everyone. because I look at Jim Lee and he's always celebrating things. DC, he's not, he has no bias towards anything. You know, you could see he would live and let live the idea that he has, the multiverse idea, and I think Jim Lee was trying to introduce the multiverse idea for that reason. I would love that. That would be the ultimate guy. Now the thing about it is, I don't know how it would work out with film slates. Like for example, Walter Amada, he's been doing this for a while. You know, the New Line Cinema stuff. So he, you know, putting out slates of films and that kind of thing. You know, Walter Amada really, that's what he does, right? He's a producer and he's been producing movies, so he knows how to do that in New Line Cinema. He's quite successful at doing it at that level, even though it's mostly horror and stuff. But now being promoted to this level, he's trying to proceed with his plan. And I don't I wish him the best with his plan. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying Walter Amada needs to let the rope be relaxed a bit when it comes to the Snyderverse. There's ways to allow that to exist and you still pursue your plans. There are ways, you know, and that's the thing that I'm not quite sure he's on board with, but he'll get on board. He'll get on board. He'll just focus on what he has to do and get on board with the rest of the stuff. So that's what I think makes Zack Snyder's DCEU separate and different, in my opinion, to other, you know, comic book movies. I said this before, but I wanted to re-emphasize it because I've been seeing Invincible online. I've been looking on YouTube and watching it Invincible, and it's about superheroes and their powers and how they use it and all that. And the intrinsic values or the intrinsic value systems, not really so much. You know, what made Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I think, so good as an animated feature, which I think is still the best of all of them. I think they're having a sequel. I don't know if it's the original people who did the first one who are coming back to do a second one, but what made it really so good, in my opinion, was again the intrinsic value systems. Even though it wasn't, again, it wasn't very deep, but it was the way I was presented, etc. The intrinsic value systems that make these movies great. Not to say that Amazon Prime Invincible didn't have little um, things that make it interesting. Of course not. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that intrinsic value, I think, is important to get sustainability, rewatchability, and you know, a purpose, an unwinding purpose for why something may be symbolic of something. You know, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse showed a certain symbolism, a certain theme that was being repeated over and over again, and I think that's important. I liked also that Peter Parker actually died in some of the versions of the Spider Verse. So I thought that was really interesting as well. All right, so that's all I gotta say for now. I'm gonna peace out. Another very long video, but I know it's worth it. I know it's worth it to speak these things, and it's good that we're coming out of the shadows and we're talking a lot more. We talk about these topics a lot. I would love to be in a discussion with somebody to talk again a little bit more about the value systems and how these value systems were, you know, got, brought forth and expressed in some of Zack Snyder's movies. I think this is the stuff that I'm actually much more interested in talking about than about violence and blood and gore and guts, and that stuff's cool and it's edgy and so on. And I think that's what the DC Online didn't get. You know, they're trying to go gory and edgy with Teen Titans, or Titans, should I say? And it's not about the goriness and edginess and bringing all these new characters in. They missed the boat on it. It's the value systems in Zack Snyder's movies, and it's just amazing how, you know, people don't always get that. Yeah, okay, Wonder Woman when she was inside of the inside of the bank. It was just punching guys, and they just slam into walls and stuff, and their head, sometimes their brains splatter out, or whatever. But ultimately, in the end, um, it wasn't about that. The focus wasn't on that. Yeah, okay, they bust their skulls. They got busted skulls hitting into the wall. We don't know if they're dead. We don't know if they're alive, but we know they got screwed up, right? Pretty bad. But at the end of the day, even so, it wasn't, the emphasis wasn't on that. And you know why people would focus on that when Zack Snyder's doing his movies? They'd focus on those things because he's built a story that's very real to them. And in the real world, we don't really experience those violent acts, at least in the Western world, very regularly like that. And when it happens, it's extremely distressing to us. We see it in the news sometimes. We see so many, acts, and to us, it's a senseless act of violence. And so Zach actually makes you feel uncomfortable seeing those things happen. And it also fills you with a certain degree of this is not natural, right? And how powerful these superheroes really are. He gets you to get that idea. As he says, and this is the other thing that I really like about Zack Snyder's movies, he says violence has a consequence to it. He's going to play out the whole thing to conclusion. It's not just a superhero killed a host of the people and stuff, or alien or whatever, and that's it. And we're just focused on the superheroes. No, it doesn't work like that. And so that's what I liked about his take on these iconic characters. And I just truly believe that that's missing now from what everybody's praising. People are praising up Invincible. Oh yeah, it's very, very bad. Challenge the superhero genre, blah, blah, blah. And I'm laughing to myself, saying to myself, yeah, right. Hypocritical, right? Because yeah, it does challenge the superhero genre, no doubt about that. But here you are really praising violence. It's edgy. It's something in which you don't know who the true hero is all the time. You're wondering what the motivations will be. It's sort of nihilistic to some degree. And that is what people are now praising. The same people who condemned Zack's movies and called Zack this and that and the other, all of a sudden they're praising this. And that's the hypocrisy of the situation, right? So I just wanted to talk about that and separate that from other movies I've seen. I can only speak from my perspective that why some of these movies, in Hollywood and what they're trying to do doesn't have much of an impact on me is because, and I say it's Hollywood and it's overacting and stuff. Why I say that all the time is because, honestly speaking, if you're not coming from a values place, or you're dwelling very, um, you're just briefly dwelling on values, but really you're more interested in pathos, like say pathos and humor. To me, pathos and humor is only goes so far. And I always feel that the deep-seated values that something represents it's much more far-reaching. So to me, uh, Zach dwelt on values and was testing the values, and he was pressing the values, and he was stretching the values. And then, if you guys would permit me, to me, he went to the spiritual place, and he was speaking from a spiritual space, if you will permit me. And I think the spiritual lessons in those movies, I think, overarch everything else and I think dominate them. So that even though these characters are fighting or whatever, he's kind of giving you almost through everything, the whether it's through the slow motion moments that you see where he slow mo's things down, you get the tangible and the intangible, meaning he's telling you a metaphor at the same time he's also telling you what's happening, right? So I call that a spiritual element in the sense that he's speaking from, in my opinion, a value perspective. It's not just something you're seeing. Some people say that Zach will slow down an everyday event and make it more important than it really is. And so they say he's pretentious. Where I don't see that. Take, for example, the Flash scene, right? Where he slows down time so you can see things from Flash's perspective. When the Flash breaks through the glass, why did he slow down that? Is it that he just likes bullet time and so, oh yeah, let's show it in slow motion? What's he doing by breaking that glass going through that door? What is it? It's a symbolism to it, in my opinion. And not to make it into more than it really is, but listen to the song that's playing in the background explaining the situation. Like, these are not coinkydinkies. These are not coincidences. You get what I'm saying? And while it is Flash's sort of infatuation with Iris West, the point is that the tender moment that comes in that act of saving the person and helps us to narrow down the world to these two people, to me, is spiritual and poetic. And Zach takes this high budget, big, massive extravaganza and narrows it down to these intimate moments that you could strip the movie of all those CGI and special effects and stuff. And what the essence of the movie is these relationships with people. One of the parts of the story that really connect with everybody, and it's one that made me cry, was the moment when Lois Lane is going to the memorial site the first time from the coffee shop. She drops off a coffee for the police officer, and she goes to the memorial just to look, just to sort of remember, to capture the spirit of Superman, because it was the values inside of Clark Kent that she's attached to. Yes, she knows Clark as a person and all that, but she was trying to protect the value of him, and she goes to see it again. And to me, that's a spiritual thing. And to me, that's what makes, if I were to say, that's what makes Zach's movies to me something that I really like. I appreciate the revisiting of values, because I lost my mom. Somebody else might have lost somebody else in the COVID environment. But what we keep on revisiting, whether we can make it from day to day or not, is those values, what made the person who they were, what they held near and dear to them. To me, that's very intimate and very personal. And it's something I can relate to when she's going to the memorial. And it's that sort of stuff that I think makes Zack Snyder's movies somewhat timeless and somewhat humanistic. I use the word humanism a lot more than spiritualism or spiritism or um, divinism or any one of those isms, right? Because I prefer to separate the divine and godly from us for a moment. Not to say that they're not very much connected, but that not to really remove the divine aspect from it, but to be able to explain to you guys that, you know, it's about us dealing with us. You know, if you really break down the word Jesus, right, you can break it down to saying us, just us, right? It's kind of slang, but it comes back down to us. Yeah. Scripture says, and I'll just go into scripture just for a minute. It says, how can you love God who you cannot see, but hate your brother who you could see? It comes down to us. I can see you, you could see me, we could talk with each other, we can relate with each other. It comes down to us. And so that is why, even though I'm not a humanist, I'm not. I like to use humanism, which a lot of people can relate to in the Western world, at least. Eastern world, we can talk more about spiritual things, but in the Western world, not so much. I like to use that as a vehicle, a tool to get us to see spiritual things. And that's the beautiful thing about this movie, the connections between individuals with each other, and how that connection is something I can easily identify with because of my connections to individuals that I had in my life. My father, my mother, my cousins. I remember them. I remember them, and they're gone. They're all gone. But yet they're still here in terms of their value systems. Their value systems still remain. And I know what made them them, and what made them uh, um, what was the best of them. So based on that, that's what carries us on. I can easily remember my mom's values, and I can take them as my own. So those are the kinds of things that I truly appreciate about Zack's movies. DCEU movies. I'm not going to talk about the other movies. Just talking about his DCEU movies. And I suspect Army of the Dead, as Zack is pitching it, is going to be a deconstruction of the zombie genre. Again, the sort of values that make a zombie genre. He's going to test them. He's going to stretch them. And I get the feeling that's what you'll see in Army of the Dead. But again, just listening to people's comments on Army of the Dead, I get the feeling that, again, it's going to be something about people, persons. It's going to tell us something about ourselves, how we, relate with ourselves and stuff like that. So I never think of Zack Snyder's movies as pretentious. I understand that there's a degree of fantasy in them, but I do understand it's also sort of grounded. And, so it's familiar enough to us that we can move from the metaphor to the reality and be able to apply it. That's the nice thing about it. I think that's what makes it, to me, that's what makes, and I do think the people in China appreciate that because, again, I guess that's their thing. I mean, they're spiritual people. And so you would understand why they would really gulp up Zack's movies like that. I think that's my personal perspective. I don't know. I know Zack likes anime, and those elements are also seen in his movies. So Wachowski brothers was the same thing. They were like fed off of anime a lot, and manga. And I think Zack kind of comes from something like that background as well. Yeah. Well, I think I talked my belly full. Hour and 9 minutes. I can really talk. I think this is just a great platform for me. I'll catch you guys later. This is Christ I Am Disciple saying peace to you guys. Peace and much love as always. I know I have a song, Us United, that's just sitting on the back burner. I got a lot of music I'm supposed to do as well for some people, and I haven't done it. I also noticed that a lot of people who are musicians, a lot of people who are sort of creatives, really enjoy Zach's movies. So maybe it's something to do with creatives and people who don't necessarily like walking the path that everybody else has walked, that maybe like his movies. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe it's a certain type of person. I'm gonna catch you guys later though. I'm out of here. Peace.